All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into a fascinating one. We're focusing on a single grape, Alvarinho.
Yeah.
But we're going to be exploring its really unique dual life in two neighboring Iberian regions,
Yeah.
Galicia in Spain and then the Verdes in Portugal.
Yeah. Think of it as like a tale of two terroirs. We'll be focusing on the Rías Baixas DO in Spain, what's known as Alvarinho, and then the Monção and Melgaço subregion within Vinhos Verdes in Portugal.
Yeah.
So it's the same grape, but the wines are very different.
Exactly. Yeah. So same DNA, but really, really different personalities. You've shared some really cool insights with me from various wine experts, really digging into the history of this grape, the land that it grows on, how these wines are made in both places. And so our mission today, I guess, is to sort of unravel how that unique combination of the climate, the soil, the lay of the land, and then all the winemaking approaches that people are using in these different places, how it all comes together to shape the character of these wines.
Absolutely. And hopefully give you a shortcut to appreciating the differences, because it can be kind of subtle and sometimes hard to get your head around.
Okay, so let's start our exploration in Galicia, specifically in the Rías Baixas region. The experts that you shared highlighted a really long and rich history for Alvarinho there, especially since the DO was officially established back in 1988.
Yeah. So Alvarinho has been part of the Galician landscape for centuries. It might have been brought there by the Romans, potentially even pilgrims, but it's become a really integral part of their culture, especially when it comes to pairing with seafood.
That makes sense. And the Atlantic influence seems absolutely crucial here. The terroir of Rías Baixas, it sounds pretty dramatic, this sort of interplay of temperate and humid conditions, mild winters, cool summers, but then a lot of rain. Plus the Atlantic, always right there with its sea breezes and its fog rolling in. What's that doing to the grape?
So that maritime climate is fundamental to the style of the wines from this area. The cool temperatures and the humidity actually mean that you get a longer growing season for the grapes, a longer ripening period. And so they can retain their acidity, but also develop really complex aromas.
I see. And then the soil as well is predominantly granitic. The experts mentioned cibro, which is decomposed granite. So it's acidic and well-draining, but has some organic matter in it. Sounds like the ideal foundation for growing grapes.
Yeah, so those granitic soils, they're actually relatively low in nutrients and they drain very freely. So it almost stresses the vines a little bit. And when a vine is stressed, it produces smaller berries with really intense flavors. The acidity of the soil also translates to the wine, so you get these really crisp and vibrant wines.
Very cool. The experts you shared also sort of broke down the different subregions within Rías Baixas, so Val do Salnés, Orozal, and Condado do Té. It sounds like each one adds its own little twist to the story.
Exactly. So Val do Salnés is the historical heartland of Alvarinho. It's right on the coast. So it's got that really strong maritime influence, and the wines from there often have a sort of salty tang to them.
I see.
Orozal, which is right on the border with Portugal, they often blend Alvarinho with other local grapes. So the wines tend to be a little more delicate, have some floral notes, some herbaceous notes as well. And then Condado do Té, which is a little further inland. It's a bit warmer and drier there. So the wines have higher acidity, a bit more structure, and tend to age for longer as well.
Yeah, here's where it gets interesting for me. That traditional way that they grow these grapes, they use this thing called emperado, or a pergola system, where they train the vines up high. I guess that's to combat the humidity, improve the airflow around the grapes, and get them more sun exposure.
Yeah, you got it. So imagine the vines are lifted up off the damp ground. It really helps to reduce the risk of fungal diseases, which can be a problem in that climate. The airflow also means that the grapes can ripen more evenly.
Very cool. Very cool. The experts did note, though, that more modern techniques like espaldera or trellising are becoming more common. Is that just driven by the need to farm more efficiently, or is there a different benefit?
It's partly efficiency. You can use machines more easily if you're using a trellis system, but it also gives you more precise control over the canopy. So how much sunlight the grapes get, how much airflow there is around them. You can really fine-tune it with a trellis system.
That makes sense. It also sounds like there's a real dedication to keeping those grape yields low, through careful pruning and even removing some leaves to really concentrate those flavors. Plus, there's a growing movement towards organic and biodynamic practices.
Absolutely. So the focus here is really on quality over quantity. When you have lower yields, the vine puts all of its energy into fewer grapes, so you get more intense flavors and aromas. And organic and biodynamic viticulture is becoming increasingly important for a lot of these producers. It's a way of working more in harmony with nature, and a lot of people believe it actually improves the quality of the wine as well.
Now, moving from the vineyard into the winery, the experts highlighted that most Rías Baixas Alvarinho undergoes fermentation in stainless steel tanks. Is that just to keep those fresh, pure fruit characteristics really front and center?
Yeah, you got it. Stainless steel is a really neutral vessel, so it doesn't impart any flavors of its own. It allows those vibrant fruit aromas to really shine through. And also, by carefully controlling the temperature during fermentation, the winemakers can really preserve those delicate aromas.
Makes sense. But it sounds like some winemakers are also experimenting with oak aging and also using amphora. Is that just to add some complexity or a different texture to the wine?
Absolutely. So while stainless steel preserves the freshness, oak can add layers of complexity. You might get hints of vanilla, spice, toast, and it can give the wine a bit more texture as well. Amphoras are interesting as well. They're porous, so they allow a small amount of oxygen to get into the wine, which can change its structure and aromas in really interesting ways.
And then we also have this potential step of, aging the wine on its lees. I guess to build even more complexity and texture.
Yeah. So aging on the lees, which is the yeast sediment that's left over after fermentation, it can give the wine a creamier texture. You might also get some subtle bready or nutty flavors as well. So it just adds another dimension.
Okay, so when we finally get a glass of this Rías Baixas Alvarinho in front of us, what are we going to notice? What are the sort of sensory hallmarks of this wine?
So visually, you'll see a pale, bright yellow color, maybe with a slight greenish tinge, which tells you it's a young, fresh wine. On the nose, you get intense aromas of citrus fruit, lemon, grapefruit, some stone fruits like peach and apricot, some delicate floral notes like orange blossom or jasmine, and then also that distinctive saline minerality. It's almost like you can smell the sea in the wine.
I love that. That ocean influence, that salty minerality sounds amazing. What about on the palate?
So on the palate, it's dry, really vibrant acidity, which makes it very refreshing, typically medium to full-bodied. And the finish is really long and persistent, often with those mineral notes coming back. It's interesting to note as well that although these wines are known for their youthful freshness, they can actually age really well. So if you're patient enough to cellar a few bottles, they'll develop some really interesting nuances over time.
Now let's make our way across the border into Portugal and explore the Alvarinho of Vinhos Verdes. Particularly from that northern sub-region of Monção and Melgaço, the experts you shared really emphasized its special status within the Vinhos Verdes region.
Yeah, definitely. So Monção and Melgaço is kind of like the grand cru of Alvarinho in Vinhos Verdes. Vinhos Verdes has this reputation for being light, fizzy, easy drinking wines. But Monção and Melgaço, it's a different beast. The wines are richer, more concentrated, more complex, and they age much better as well.
And the terroir there also sounds quite different. A sort of transitional climate, kind of moving from that very Atlantic influence towards a more continental feel. So a bit warmer and drier than Rías Baixas, greater temperature variations between day and night, and also less rainfall overall.
Right. So those subtle shifts in climate make a big difference to the final wines. So those slightly warmer, drier conditions mean that the grapes can achieve a bit more ripeness on the vine. So wines tend to have a fuller body, and those fruit flavors are a little bit riper as well. And because of the temperature variation between day and night, they actually retain their acidity too.
Fascinating. And the soils, again, are mostly granite-based, but the experts mentioned some outcroppings of schist as well. What does that add?
So schist is a metamorphic rock. It adds another layer of complexity to the wines. You often get this kind of flinty minerality, maybe even a little bit earthy. Just gives the wines a bit more depth and texture.
And then you also have this influence of the Minho River, which flows through the region. It helps to moderate the climate, brings in cooling breezes, and also contributes to humidity and the development of those aromas in the grapes.
Yeah, so the Minho River is a really important element of the terroir in Monção and Melgaço. Those breezes help to preserve acidity in the grapes, and the humidity can actually help the aromas to develop more fully.
Fascinating. Now, they also grow the vines. Traditionally, they're using this thing called the cruzeta, which is another type of pergola system. So, again, high training for good airflow and protection from that heat radiating up from the soil.
Right. So it's interesting that you see these parallel adaptations in both regions. They both use these high training systems because they're so well suited to the local conditions. So the Cruzetta lifts the grapes off the ground, improves air circulation, and protects them from getting scorched, especially in those warmer months.
And it sounds like the winemaking story is kind of similar to Rias Baixas' respect for tradition, but also an openness to embrace those more modern techniques that can help to improve the wine.
Yeah, absolutely. So the winemakers in Monção and Melgaço, they really value the traditional knowledge and practices, but they're also very open to using modern technology to help them achieve the best possible quality.
And in terms of actually making the wine, stainless steel fermentation at those cool temperatures is still the dominant approach to really preserve those really delicate aromas.
Absolutely. As with Rias Baixas, the aim is to capture the purity and the vibrancy of the Alvarinho grape. So cool fermentations are essential for that. They preserve those volatile aromas that make the wine so distinctive.
But they do have this potential step of pre-fermentation skin contact, just to kind of amp up those aromas and flavors even further.
Yeah. So pre-fermentation skin contact means that the juice from the grapes is in contact with the skins for a period of time before fermentation begins. And that allows the winemaker to extract more flavor and aroma compounds from the skins. It can also give the wine a little bit more texture as well.
And some producers are also using older French oak barrels for aging. But the goal is really to add complexity and texture without overpowering the grape.
Absolutely. So oak aging can add those lovely subtle notes of spice, vanilla, toast. But you want to make sure that those flavors don't dominate the inherent character of the Alvarinho. So using older barrels is a good way to achieve that.
And then also you mentioned aging on the lees, again, just to give the wine a bit more body and complexity.
Yeah. So aging on the lees can give the wine a richer texture. It can add some subtle bready or nutty flavors. And it just gives it a bit more depth overall.
So when we actually taste this Monção and Melgaço Alvarinho, what are we looking for? What are its sort of key sensory characteristics?
So the color is often a little richer than the wines from Rias Baixas. You might see a pale straw color, even a light golden hue. Sometimes there's a slight spritz as well, so a little bit of residual carbon dioxide, which gives the wine a bit of a tingle on the tongue.
Yeah.
In terms of aromas, you get those ripe citrus fruits, lemon, lime, stone fruits, peach, apricot, um, really intense floral aromas, orange blossom, violet, and then also a really distinctive mineral note. But it can be quite different to the minerality you get in Rias Baixas. It's often more flinty, maybe even a little bit earthy.
I see.
On the palate, it's dry, very vibrant acidity, maybe a little bit softer than the Rias Baixas wines. The body is generally a bit fuller as well. But it's still a very elegant wine with a long, persistent finish, and often those mineral notes coming back on the finish. And importantly, these wines can age really well. So if you cellar them for a few years, they develop these beautiful honeyed and nutty complexities.
Okay, so let's try and break down these key differences for our listeners. Starting with the terroirs, the climate really seems like a key differentiator here. With Monção and Melgaço being a little bit warmer, a little bit drier, how does that translate into the wine?
Yeah, so that warmer, drier climate allows the grapes to ripen a little bit more fully in Monção and Melgaço. So you get those riper fruit flavors, and the wines are a little bit fuller bodied as well. Whereas in Rias Baixas, that maritime climate really preserves that freshness and that crispness and that salinity that we talked about.
Soil-wise, both are rooted in granite, but then we have that mention of more clay, potentially, in Monção and Melgaço, and shift in some parts of Rias Baixas. What's that doing?
Yeah, so the clay in Monção and Melgaço can actually contribute to the body of the wines. It can make them a little bit richer. And then the schist in Rias Baixas, that adds a really distinctive mineral character. It can be quite flinty, maybe even a little bit smoky sometimes.
And then just thinking about the topography and the location of the vineyards, Monção and Melgaço sounds more mountainous. Those vineyards are planted a bit higher up on average. How does that play out?
So the higher altitude vineyards in Monção and Melgaço, they benefit from those big temperature differences between day and night. So the days are warm, the nights are cool, and that helps the grapes to retain their acidity even though they're ripening more fully. Whereas the Rias Baixas vineyards, they're generally lower lying, closer to the coast, and they have a much more consistent climate because of the influence of the ocean.
So when we're actually tasting these wines side by side, what are the really key sensory differences that we should be looking out for?
So the Ria Spicious Alvarinho is going to have that real zesty citrus character, maybe some green apple as well, and then that distinctive saline minerality. It's almost like you can taste the sea salt on your lips.
Love that.
Whereas the Monção and Melgaço Alvarinho is going to have those riper fruit flavors. So think more like peach, apricot, maybe even some tropical fruit notes. The floral aromas are going to be more pronounced as well. And the minerality is often more subtle and it's more of a flinty or an earthy character.
And then acidity-wise, they both have, that lovely, refreshing zip.
Yeah.
But is there a difference there?
Yeah. So they both have really vibrant acidity, but in Rias Baixas, it tends to be a little bit sharper, more pronounced. Whereas in Monção and Melgaço, it's a little bit softer, more integrated, so it's not quite as mouth puckering.
Okay. And then we also have a difference in body,
Yeah.
right, with Rias Baixas typically being a bit lighter than Monção and Melgaço.
Yeah. So the Monção and Melgaço wines tend to have a bit more weight on the palate. They're a little bit richer, and that's partly because of that warmer climate and also the influence of the clay in the soil.
Aromatic intensity, it sounds like both regions are producing wines that are, pretty fragrant, but those dominant aromas are quite different, right?
Absolutely. So both wines are intensely aromatic, but the character of those aromas is very different. You've got that real zingy citrus and that salinity in Rias Baixas, and then those more luscious, ripe fruit and floral notes in Monção and Melgaço.
And then finally, what about aging potential? They both have the ability to age, but do they age in a similar way?
So both wines can age really well. They've got the acidity and the structure to develop over time, but they do age in slightly different ways. So the Rias Baixas wines, they often develop those honeyed and nutty characters that you get with bottle age. But the Monção and Melgaço wines, they can develop those characters as well, but the minerality tends to persist for longer, and they often retain a bit more freshness as well.
So the key takeaway here is that although both Galicia and Monção and Melgaço are producing really exceptional Alvarinho wines, the differences in terroir and winemaking really do result in two very distinct styles of wine.
Exactly. And it just goes to show how important those factors are in shaping the final character of a wine.
The experts that you shared also sort of touched on the global market for Alvarinho. It sounds like it's really establishing itself as a major player in the world of, premium white wines.
Yeah, it really is. And it's great to see it getting the recognition that it deserves. It's a fantastic food wine. It's got a really unique character, and it's really versatile as well.
And it sounds like Galicia and Monção and Melgaço are really at the forefront of this, leading the way in terms of production and driving that recognition.
Absolutely. They're the two key regions for Alvarinho, and they're both doing a fantastic job of showcasing what this grape can do.
It's also interesting to hear about these broader trends in the wine world. This growing interest in aromatic white wines, the desire to discover those indigenous grape varieties, and then also this focus on wines that really have a strong sense of place.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alvarinho ticks all of those boxes. It's an aromatic white grape. It's indigenous to this specific region, and it really expresses the terroir of where it's grown.
Of course, there are always challenges. The importance of sustainability, climate change, and then just the competition in the global wine market.
Yeah, those are all really important considerations. Sustainability is obviously crucial for the long-term health of the industry and the planet. Climate change is a big threat to vineyards all over the world. And the wine market is very competitive, so producers need to be constantly innovating and striving for excellence.
This has been a really fantastic deep dive into Alvarinho. It's amazing how such a tiny geographical area, can produce such distinct wines from the same grape. It really is a testament to how those factors like, where it's grown, how it's made, all come together to shape what we experience in the glass.
Absolutely. It's like a little microcosm of the wine world, isn't it?
Yeah. And for our listeners out there, we really encourage you to try both the Rias Baixas Alvarinho and the Monção and Melgaço Alvarinho.
Yeah.
Taste them side by side. See if you can pick out those differences that we've been talking about. Really take the time to smell the wines, taste them thoughtfully, and just appreciate that unique story that each one is telling.
Yeah. And do some research. Find out some of the producers that are working in those regions and seek out their wines. You won't be disappointed.
I totally agree. And a final thought to leave you with. Think about, how powerful those geographical and historical forces can be in shaping something as seemingly simple as a grape, and what other hidden stories might be waiting to be uncovered in your own areas of interest. Until next time.
Until next time.